Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bishop Kelley's FAFSA night. I'm Jennifer Knapp. I am college counselor for those students with the last name of A through K. Down there is Allison Dilley. She is the college counselor here for L through Z. And we are welcoming Crystal Lacey from the University of Tulsa. She's the director of new student scholarships, and she's going to be sharing some information about the FAFSA, as well as some general information, as well as some University of Tulsa specific. So I'm going to hand it over to her and let her begin.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Happy to be here. So I have actually worked for the University of Tulsa for 13 years, and I started off in admission, and I just transitioned my way over to financial aid. I've been working closely with them for a very long time. And so a lot of this will look to you specific at times, but I will be going over a lot of information for a lot of schools. I've had the pleasure of learning a lot about a lot of different schools, working with a lot of my colleagues from different schools in Oklahoma and really across the region. I will try to hit everything, so we'll have time for Q&A, and then we'll have time afterwards to chat as well. I know sometimes questions, especially in regards to your finances, are not something that you really want to yell across the room. And then also we'll have my cards. They're over there in the corner there, and it has my cell phone, my work phone, and my email. I'm very accessible, and this process can feel very daunting regardless of your financial resources. And so I'm really here to try to make it where you understand, you know what you're doing, and kind of maybe help you unpack the financial aid process. So just know that I'm a resource and here to help. So of course, we'll kind of talk about merit-based funding at first. And usually kind of the baseline of any financial aid package, offer letter, things like that would be your university scholarship. Typically, this would be merit-based, meaning that it's your students' GPA, ACT, SAT, extracurricular involvement, their awards, their accolades, their personal merit. And a lot of times it is what they are reviewed for when they are applying for admission. So the application for admission isn't something that you should take lightly at institutions, because it typically serves as kind of a twofer, if you will. When you're applying for admission, you're typically applying for scholarship as well. So you'll want to really figure out what the requirements are for the schools that you're considering. What are they looking at? For example, Oklahoma State, they have assured admission. They have assured scholarships on their website. You kind of have an idea of what you're looking at. And then they have competitive scholarships that you'll apply for, and you'll want to make sure you complete their essays for them. Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma, University of Tulsa, we use the holistic approach. So we don't necessarily have guidelines that are out on the website, because we'll be looking at all parts of the student record to make those decisions. And you'll want to see, what is each school looking at when they're looking at my student. And the reason why that's important is because, do you have any holes in your application that you need to address? Because your application and your admission are important, but they're looking at those same factors for scholarship purposes. And so if you know what they're looking at, you know what you can kind of address, maybe let a committee know about a poor semester, or maybe you struggle with testing, so on and so forth. Outside scholarships. So I know that this is the last thing that students want to do. I know when I was a high school senior almost 20 years ago, that I didn't want to do it either, but now especially that I'm entering in outside scholarships for students, and I see the impact that it makes on their bursar statement, your students really need to take at least some time to do this. I have one student from Lawton, Oklahoma that was able to secure $33,000. Now, that's obviously one of the awesome cases that goes above and beyond, but there are quite a few students that are able to secure $5,000, $10,000, a couple thousand. All of that helps, especially depending on where you're going to school. and some of them can be renewed each year. And most of these outside organizations allow you to use the funds for anything school related, whether it be tuition, fees, books, transportation, whatever it might be. So, and you want to shake any tree that you think will be fruitful. Your job, your community, your student's major that they might be considering. And also another misconception is that that stops once you're a student at an institution. You can still apply for outside scholarships once you're a student at an institution and still obtain scholarships. It is work that a lot of students don't want to do as a senior. I know I didn't. And maybe you're really busy, of course, as a college student, but it can really pay off. And so I encourage your students and you, as you'll be the ones that are probably pushing them along, to do that and help them kind of get that together. And I'll have a list here in a minute of some sites that we have had really good luck with our students. And then, of course, federal and state aid, we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. So I want to talk about our presidential scholarship, but I want you to also think about your students who are academically awesome, stellar. You want to know what are those big scholarships at schools that your students are applying to, like say it's the chancellors, insert whatever name here, full tuition awards, full rides. Now understand that a lot of these are very competitive. And so I know sometimes I hear families really get their heart set on that, and you have every right to do that, but you know, these are something that, for example, our application for this, 10% of the applicants receive the scholarship. And I know it's a heartbreaker every year for the students that do not. But my point to you with this is that, for example, you know, we have requirements for this application. It's an application. You have to visit campus. We want you to meet with your admission counselor. But there are a lot of things that are optional. And we are looking at students who want to receive the scholarship and come to the institution. So you want to push your student, especially at the schools that they are really heavily considering for scholarships like this, to do those optional things because they are competing with people who are just like them. High ACTs, high GPAs, involved at their schools, community service. How can they set themselves apart? And I also like to tell students that this is not a time to not brag. This is a time to really talk about yourself, because if you don't, the next student will. So just some things like this. So for our presidential scholarship, for example, we have added a new qualifier to be able to apply for this, and that is the ACT or SAT requirement. So in order to qualify, you'll need to have a 28 ACT or 1300 SAT, and yes, we super score. So we'll pull the highest sub-score to form a super composite from any test you take. And then you'll have that requirement and one of the others below. You're recognized by College Board as one of their scholars. They have National Hispanic, Rural Scholar, different things like that. Be in the top 5% of your class, or have a weighted GPA of 4.0. So deadlines are also going to be really important at every school you're considering. This one is a hard and fast deadline. There's no extensions, different things like that. So your top however many schools, for me it would probably be top 5. You want to know exactly what those deadlines are, because once you miss them, unfortunately, it's too late. And so for us, when we will be reviewing that with the committee and the president, we'll release those around like April 1st, just to kind of give you an idea about turnaround. But look for those scholarships at the schools that you're considering, because they are there for you to apply for. So kind of when I talked about what are we looking for when we're reviewing scholarships, this is what I want you to kind of get in the frame of mind in when you insert school here, right? So at the University of Tulsa, we're going to be looking at your high school academic record. Are you challenging yourself to the best of your ability in what your school offers? How are you doing in those courses? We are still test optional. However, we are not test blind. So if you have a concern about submitting a test score at TU or anywhere else, never submit it without double checking if you have a concern. And even that, I mean, don't submit a test score even unofficially, like putting on an application, because once a school has it, they have it, right? And you want to make sure that if you're truly applying test optional, that you don't give information that you're not ready to give. You can always submit ACT or SAT later. You can submit it on a transcript officially through the testing agency. For us, we take student-reported scores through the report that the student gets. So that's just kind of a tip there, because that can really affect scholarship or even admission at some schools. So just kind of a tip there. For us, we award it for essentially 4 years, 8 semesters, or until you receive your first degree, whichever comes first, because some students do come in with quite a bit of credit. Our only requirement really is that you're a full-time student. So another thing too, you want to see, are there any GPA stipulations with scholarships that your students are receiving? We do not have any. We do not want to take scholarships away if students are struggling. TU is expensive, and we don't want to rip away a high scholarship from a student if they happen to have a bad semester. So, but not every school has that, and you'll want to know what those requirements will be for that. And so, of course, our scholarship range will vary, and our scholarships also only go towards tuition. So they do not cover room and board, books, or fees. So that's another thing you'll want to understand too at TU or anywhere else. What does this cover? And so for us, again, we look at your weighted GPA. We will look at your test scores if you submit them, your course rigor and course selection, and what a student is involved in, where they're doing outside the classroom, any recommendations, an interview. The more you give us, the more we can know about you, and the more our admission office can advocate for you. So when you're applying typically at a private institution, you might have an opportunity for grant funding. Not saying that public institutions don't have this opportunity. I have not seen it at this point in time, but for TU, for example, we give out need-based funding if you submit the FAFSA. And so this is not federal or state dollars, it's TU dollars that we assign based on your results from the FAFSA. And I recommend that you complete the FAFSA at least once, because at most schools, you're going to be reviewed for the most funding on your way into the institution. So you want to make sure you at least do it that one time. You don't qualify for anything, great. Don't ever have to do it again. It's a lot easier than it used to be, luckily, but you don't have to do it again. And for us, we only review students for the TU grant as they're an incoming student. It is renewable for all 4 years. Don't have to complete the FAFSA again unless you're utilizing federal aid in some capacity. But you also want to ask about this. Is there any need-based funding that I can apply for that's institutional? This also only goes towards tuition. Another thing too that I think can be something that you may not think about is if you're living at home or on campus, your cost of attendance can change. That means your level of need can change. And so if you are talking with TU or maybe any other school with that, talk about living options and see if that changes any scholarship, any need-based aid, just to make sure that you understand what your costs are going to be. So we were talking about dance and everything, and so talent-based scholarships are something that can be a really amazing part about college in general, but also can mean extra funds. I know that we've invested a lot recently in our marching band, which is really exciting. And so for us, you know, we have music and other schools as well where you can audition to be either a music major or even just a part of the marching band or ensembles. Or things like that. So some schools are going to have a different kind of setup. For us, we want to have students participate, so we have non-major opportunities as well. well. We have an art program, and so we have scholarships for majors only. Of course, with our athletics, we're Division I, so we are giving scholarships for that, and we are moving to a only athletic funding model. So that's something that we're doing. But there are just so many opportunities that you can utilize, whether it be dance, theater, whatever thing that your student is interested in, gaming. I know like e-gaming is a big thing now. Definitely ask those questions. The worst thing that they can tell you is we don't offer that, or whatever it might be. So you just definitely want to make sure that you're double checking with that. Now, typically, especially if it's major specific, you might lose that funding if you change your major. So definitely have a talk with your kiddo about, you're going to major in this. Is this something that you want to continue? But it's a great opportunity to be able to do that. Okay, this is where we talk about outside scholarships. I recommend getting on and doing the sites that you can create a profile. And a lot of these are like that, where you can go in there and, select Crystal Lacey, this major, this GPA, this test score, these interests, because it can be really overwhelming, and I know that. We all know that. And so you can also set up alerts as well as new scholarships come up. I do think that it can be helpful to set up a special email for things like this, because you might get a lot of email. So you might set up a separate email just for your outside scholarships to kind of help keep it straight. But these are some good ones. Scholarship America, I see scholarships come through that all the time. Also, if you have tribal funding, any tribe that you're a part of, we get a lot of that as well. So definitely make sure you push your students. Talk to your high school counselor as well and ask about that. We're here to help. Also, when you visit campuses, you have an opportunity to meet with faculty. Ask them about if they know of any special scholarships for students in their major. Definitely get out there and ask all the questions you can about extra funding, because it can really close your out of pocket. Did everybody take a picture of that wanted to? All right, now we get into the fun stuff, and I say that jokingly, but the FAFSA. So it's going to open soon, and I'm happy that we're back to doing this in October. And I guess it's actually already open for some students to apply, which is great. Now, when you start applying for the FAFSA, the way I try to remember what tax year to use, if you're applying for the academic year 2026, subtract 2, that's the tax year you're using. So we use prior year. They moved to that quite a few years ago to make sure that you don't have to jump through as many hoops to get your taxes done in order to apply for federal aid. So it will open October 1st, and you'll want to get on there and make sure that you set up your accounts. Remember your passwords and all of those things, because as parents, you will have the same login and all of those things each year moving forward. They make you do the authentication and all of that stuff. They'll lock you out. Like, they're very secure with all of that. And you want to make sure too that you have your social security number ready and all that stuff. I do know this year I'm really excited, and I went to my first financial aid conference, and this got cheers across the room, that when your kiddo is going to be sending you an invitation to be a contributor, they don't have to enter your social security number, and that got a big roar, because I know that's been an issue. So they'll be able to send you an email to say, hey, it's your turn, tag you're it, and you will be able to be the adult and enter those things in. So when the time comes, it's a little bit more streamlined than it has been. But they have you do what they call a wizard. So if you're wondering, like, okay, What parent is supposed to do this? They have a setup to help you figure just that. And I'm going to go through some scenarios here now, but when you go to the wizard, it's essentially going to ask you different questions, and you and I could be sitting right next to each other and not get the same question. So it's not one of those things that everybody is going to have the same thing, because it's very dependent on your own situation and your own structure. So, with the parent contributor, so if your parents are married, or if your adoptive parents are married, then both parents' information can be or needs to be included on the FAFSA. If your parents did not, file taxes jointly, both parents are contributors, and both of their information will need to be sent out for consent. However, if your parents filed jointly, only one parent needs to do it. So a lot of it depends on if your parents are married, adoptive parents are married, did you file jointly or not? And that will determine on how much information, how many parents you will need in order to complete the FAFSA. The wizard is going to help you figure all of this out. And so this is something that they implemented when they did the FAFSA simplification, because this is something that financial aid officers are working with families every year to kind of help them figure this out. That makes sense to everybody? That's one of the easier ones. So with your biological or adoptive parents that are living together, so for parents that are married, unmarried, but they're living together, so both parents are going to be contributors, even if they were never married, or if they're divorced or separated. So both information for both parents would be on the FAFSA there. Divorce. So it'll ask the question about, did one parent provide more financial support than the other over the last 12 months? Depending on that answer, if the answer was yes, then that parent's information is going to be on the FAFSA as the contributor. If that parent has remarried as well, then the spouse income will be included too. If the answer is no, then the parent with the higher income will need to be provided. And so you'll send that information, the student will send that information to the parent to make sure that they're the contributor. So if the parent has remarried, then their spouse income will be on there as well. So if you're like, we got to hammer this out, that's where we will talk, and because sometimes it can get very granular, and that's what we're here for. But this is kind of like general information here. If the wizard can't help you, we will. So some tips. I do have some. You want to make sure that you have correct Social Security numbers. And I know for parents, you think that's a no-brainer. That gets in the way of a lot of financial aid, getting your financial aid package for a lot of families, especially students. That is one of the most unique identifiers that we have with the federal government, and that's just really what they use. And so make sure that you're not slowing yourself down, and make sure that you're entering in the correct information. You're going to need your tax returns. Luckily, if you're using the IRS data retrieval tool, which is why they have tried to make this a pretty secure process, because it is literally pulling in your IRS data, and why I say that the FAFSA is a lot faster to complete now than it used to be, because it pulls it in, you verify a few things, and you're able to move along with your day if everything works according to plan. But you want to make sure that you have the information available to you in case doesn't work that day. Maybe you had an issue with your taxes, different things like that. So you want to have the information available. Your child support, your cash savings, all of that stuff, all those things around, keep them as well. Sometimes families get chosen for verification and things like that. And so if you have that information on hold, available to us if we need it later, we're able to move a lot quickly and get your information a lot faster. Sure. So if you're using a savings account, we take all of that information and all of that, but you will be working with your 529 and sending that over to whatever bursar office that you're working with. I don't think you have to claim those things like that on your FAFSA. Yeah. There are certain savings accounts that you will have to promote if you have cash savings and things like that on hand, but like retirement income and things like that, you do not have to, and I would not, because it can really mess up your student aid index, because some families will mistakenly put down their retirement income and it will inflate that, and so you want to pull in exactly what it's asking for and nothing more. Don't answer questions that they don't ask for. This is really what I was talking about with consent. It's just because since it's pulling directly from the federal government, they're asking for your consent. It's just a long way of saying that because it's dealing strictly straight from the government, they have to provide consent and approval. So that's why you have to go through some of those extra steps. When we moved to, and by we, I mean when the government moved to prior year, sometimes your current circumstances don't reflect 2 years ago. Every school has a little bit of a different process for how they handle that. So if you, for example, have dealt with divorce, job loss, extreme health expenses, different things like that, you'll want to reach out to the schools that you're heavily considering quickly and figure out what that process is. For us, we do some kind of vetting a little bit because we want to make sure that if we take you through the hoops, that it's truly worth doing, because we are changing results on your FAFSA and there is a lot of paperwork to do that. And so we will kind of run some numbers to let you know if it'll make an impact, and if it won't, we will tell you, and if it will, we will make sure we go through that with you. But we don't want to make you go through those steps if it truly won't impact anything for you. And so if you do have special circumstances, things like that, homelessness, we'll want to make sure that you work with a financial aid office to figure out what the process is. And the reason why I say to do it early is because we're waiting on the government as well, and they are short-staffed right now. And so while they have been doing a great job with processing, I will definitely give them that. It's not as fast as it has been, and so we want to make sure that we're getting things on time for you. So with federal grants, we have our Pell Grant, which is the max Pell Grant, $73.95. That is for families who have the absolute highest need, basically saying they cannot contribute anything to their education. And students can only receive a certain amount of Pell throughout their time in college. So there is a limit, of course. If you qualify for Pell, you'll qualify for a grant that they call SEOG. It is a small grant, so at TU, for example, it's $600, but it is kind of one of those, you qualify for one, you qualify for the other. And then it is a common misconception that private institutions in Oklahoma don't take Oklahoma Promise. There's always an asterisk to everything. We do take it. However, it does not cover full tuition. What the state does is they average the in-state tuition, and they pay $180 a credit hour to TU, ORU, any of the other private institutions in state. And so you can receive that funding at any school in state. It might just look a little different whether you're going public or private, but students still receive that money at the University of Tulsa if they qualify. So definitely complete the FAFSA if you think you'll qualify. These grants can really help students close the gap. Now, a big thing is work study, and this is an opportunity to work on campus. There are typically more jobs that fall under the work study umbrella than institutional jobs that just any student can apply for at most institutions. And the work study jobs are need-based, so you have to have some kind of financial need. Now, the parameters are wider than, say, the Pell Grant, but you have to have some kind of financial need to qualify. Freshmen, for example, at TU can earn $4,500 their first year. They're typically taxed at a lower rate. It doesn't count towards their income for the next FAFSA. Like I said, more choice of jobs, different things like that. We do have jobs outside of that students can do, and it'll work that way at any other institution. For us, we do have the student get the job. They do have to get out there and find the job. We do help if they run into a snag. I have a student coming in I'm going to help them find a job, but they get that job. They usually work anywhere from, it depends on the student, but 8 to 15 hours a week, depending on how much they want to earn and what they want to do. But I found working on campus is a really awesome opportunity to be a student, to make some money, to meet some people outside of your major, your dorm, all of those things. So I do heavily recommend students working, even if it's just a little bit, whether it be work study, an institutional job. It's a great way to pay for fund money or put it back towards your account. It's up to you, but if you have questions about work study, definitely ask your financial aid office. Sometimes it's not automatically awarded because they don't always ask that question on the FAFSA anymore. And some schools only have so many spots, so they don't want to award it to just anybody. And so that's for us. We don't just award it to everybody because we want to make sure that the students who are actually getting it want to utilize it. So just keep that in the back of your mind. If you don't see it and you think you qualify, ask. All right. Everybody qualifies for loans. Direct loans, they used to also be called Stafford loans. Same thing. Students qualify for loans, and so you'll see them listed under subsidized or unsubsidized. The breakup has to do with financial need. Subsidized means that the student will not accrue interest while they're in school. Unsubsidized is the opposite. You will accrue interest, so I like to say the U is you pay, to remember the difference. And so the student, of course, will decide if they want to take out the loan. They'll have 6 months until they have to start repaying after graduation. And so their freshman year, their first year, they're eligible for $5,500. Sophomore year, $6,500. Junior and senior year, they're eligible for $7,500. I'm going to talk about the other column here in a second. And so the student will go in and essentially do 3 things to achieve this. This loan is in their name and their name only. That's why there are caps. So parents are not involved in any of this on their credit or anything. I know for some families that's a concern. They have to accept the loan through their school because we will be the ones to help disperse it to them. They have to go in and do loan counseling, which I would tell your student to take that seriously because they're going to talk about loan stipulations, interest, all of those things. And then they have to sign a master promissory note that essentially says, I'm going to pay this back no matter what. And then we disperse it. We'll disperse half in the fall, half in the spring. Pretty straightforward after that. So that's one of those loans for a student that they accept it and that's it. Now, you'll also hear about the parent loan, the PLUS loan, and that is undergoing some changes this next year, for your year. Now there will be caps. And so it used to be that families could take out a PLUS loan up to cost of attendance, and that could vary at any school. Now it is $20,000 per year per kiddo. So once you hit that limit, that's it. Whereas, some families might have taken 30, 40,000 each year, depending on where they're at, and didn't have to worry about that. But that is a change this year with some of the changes with the new bill that we have. Now with the parent loan, this part has not changed. There is a credit check. It's a softer credit check than a private loan. They're usually looking at slow pays, no pays, bankruptcies, different things like that, defaults. And for some families, this is a good way to go because of that. The interest rate, though, maybe is not as competitive. It's a set interest rate. It's close to 9%. Some families say, I'm going to go private loan because I can do better. That is purely situational in your circumstance, and that is up to you. With this loan, you have the opportunity to defer it until your student graduates, or you can start paying on it when it disperses. You do have that choice. However, you will be accruing interest. Now, that chart I talked about, if a parent is denied a PLUS loan, their student can be eligible for more direct loan. Again, there are caps. So say a student's denied, or a parent, is denied a PLUS loan, then a first year student can get $9,500, sophomore $10,500, junior, senior $12,500. So that's kind of why that chart is like that. And then also independent students, that chart is what they can qualify for. So just to kind of give you an idea of the possibilities, but that's why that's written that way. So another thing too, no school is allowed to have preferred lenders. That's a conflict of interest. But if you are ever wondering if you want to go a private loan route, every school can have a list of lenders that their students are using, at least give you a starting point if you're like, I don't even know where to begin. So you might check that out. I know for us, we partner with Elm Select, and so it is nice to see different lenders and what their interest rates can kind of be, so you can kind of maybe knock some people off from the beginning to be like, that's not what I want to apply for. So there are different ways to go about financing your education. It's all about what works for you and your family, not any path is always the same. I always talk about it. It's really about putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And the thing is that each school wants to really help you make their package a viable option. And I know at TU, we really want to sit down with you and go line by line through that. And so know that we're here to help you do that if we are on your list. Which brings us to kind of what the season we're in right now. Our payment plans for our current students are due on Monday. And we really want to work with families and give them as many options as possible. And so we do have an interest-free payment plan. And there is a fee to set it up. It's $30. But what we do is we have families put down 25% down and then divide it up between the semester, no interest, you pay it, then you're good to go. And so you can use that for as much or as little as you want. And so we work with families to make sure that they've got options with that. I want to make sure that there are a lot of ways that you're going to receive this information. A lot of schools in Oklahoma utilize the same system. And so what TU plans to do and what you will receive from other schools as well is that you'll typically receive what we call a financial aid offer letter, award letter, financial aid package. It'll be called a bunch of different things. We call it an offer letter. And what it should state are a few different things. And you kind of don't, when you look at it, don't get the sticker shock too much yet, because look through it. It's there to give you information first. The first thing you're going to see with any school, or you should see, is cost of attendance. This is a federal mandate. And so you have to have your tuition, your fees, your room and board, your books, your transportation, your personal expenses, and loan fees. Every year, the financial aid office comes up with that budget. And the reason why, that's a federal reason, but it's also supposed to give you kind of an idea of what your maximum budget should look like. And we set that up from a kid coming from California to down the street. So that's information. There are some things that are going to be charged to you. Understand what your billable costs are. Tuition, fees, room and board. Transportation, personal expenses, loan fees will not be charged to you. Think of that as an FYI. Not saying ignore it, but think of it as an FYI at first. When I talk financial aid reviews and going over costs, I like to talk about what's actually going to be billed to you, and then we can kind of bring in those other costs later and talk about that. So don't let that freak you out. I know a lot of families see that cost of attendance first and then billable costs and kind of go, So just understand the difference between that. It's a federal mandate why we have to have that. And then what you should have is the aid that you've been offered. Scholarship, if you qualify for any need-based grants from the institution, any federal or state grants, any loans, any work study. And then it should show your out-of-pocket. We utilize an interactive worksheet that really allows you to get down to what your out-of-pocket cost should be. Does the math for you and everything. It's my favorite part. And what I recommend for you to do at any school you're heavily considering, even if you know how you're going to pay for it, even if money is not an issue, sit down with the financial aid office or admission counselor or whoever you feel like meeting with and go through it together. Because do you know the stipulation for your scholarships? Do you know when your first payment is due? Do you know if this scholarship's renewable for all 4 years? Like, ask those questions. Do you know if you have any lab fees or things that you haven't seen yet? To me, there's a lot of information that can come out of those meetings that may not mean that you are concerned about affording it, but it's information. And so for me, I go through every single thing. This fee means this. This stipulation is this. You're going to have to fill out the FAFSA again because of this. And so you just want to make sure that you're getting that information. Your bill is due this time. We bill fall and spring. So there's just a lot of information that you can get by making sure you're meeting with the schools that you're truly considering. Typically, you're going to receive financial aid in late fall, early spring, mid-spring, depending on the school. And most schools are going to hope or expect a decision from you until May 1st. So that you'll have your scholarship, your financial aid, all those things in place for you until then. And so nobody should be rushing you through the process unless you apply early decision or something like that. So just know that you can advocate for yourself and give yourself plenty of time to make the decision that's best for you financially. That's my contact info. I also have my cards. And now I want to make sure that I open it up for questions. That was a lot of information. And I'm sure I missed something. So is there anything that needs to be clarified? Any questions or something I didn't cover? How can I help? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so the question basically was like, who is going to be on on the FAFSA in case of divorce. And in that case, usually it's whoever's providing the most support. It can be who is the kid is living with, but sometimes that's not always the case. So if you, the wizard can help with that when you complete that. And then if you want to talk about that and really get into the nitty gritty, we can definitely help you narrow that down, because yeah, that's honestly, to be honest, one of the conversations I have the most is about divorced parents and who's supposed to be on the FAFSA. So that's not uncommon. But usually it's I'm sorry. So for us, or for the FAFSA, it's either who provides the most support, and if it's 50-50, then who makes the most money. Yes, sir. I will double check, but my inkling is it will be going off each tax year. So if it's 2024 and whoever falls within those parameters that year, then that's who it'll go with. So say she claimed your son on 2024 and she provided most of the support that year, then we would go with mom that year, and say next year it's vice versa, then we would go with you. Then it would honestly be whoever falls within that situation each year. That's who they would go with. I think it's the same thing about whoever provides the most support or who makes the most money. So if it's claiming on taxes and that falls within that, then that's who they would go with. Then it would be her. Yeah. What else? Yes, ma'am. So everybody qualifies for loans regardless, and you qualify for 5,500, and that's the max loan that anybody can qualify for. So there's nope. So the FAFSA basically determines if you qualify for any need-based aid, and technically with the loan there is still a component in that you still could qualify for some of your interest to not accrue while you're in school. So say you had a $300,000 SAI, all of your loan is going to be unsubsidized, but maybe you had a $50,000 SAI and maybe some of that could end up being unsubsidized and subsidized, but you wouldn't qualify for any need-based aid. So there's still a little bit of component in there, but that's kind of where that falls into play. So yeah, so the question was, with the new limit with the parent loan, is the $20,000 including the $5,500? And the answer is no, they are separate. The question was, do private loans I'm doing this for the live feed, by the way, if you're wondering why I'm doing this. The private loans they have their own stipulations. So, for example, one of my private loans when I was in college, I paid the interest, but it was all deferred. So it just depends. Another thing too with private loans that people don't always know about is that you can search for certain loans that say have cosigner release. So say you cosign for your student and you find a lender, I know Sally Mae is one of them. There's a bunch of them, but they have cosigner release where after they graduate, they make so many payments on time, then you can absolve yourself from that debt and pass it on to your student. So there are things you can look out for if you know what you're looking out for with private lenders, but you have to make sure you pick that lender. So yeah, so parents can sign a parent loan, or you can co-sign for your student and do it that way as well. So it depends on how you want to do it. Some parents decide that they're taking the loan, it's on them. My situation was my dad said, I'll co-sign for you, but it's on you. So it just depends on your situation, how you want to do it. But that's not something that a lot of people talk about. So I always try to let families know, like, there are options to, get yourself off of that debt if you do it right. FAFSA, well, okay, there's a caveat to this. Colleges typically do not require it, but I know Oklahoma is now for graduation, the state. But we do not require you that you do it, and OU, OSU don't either, like in the state. No, from high school. I don't know I know public schools it's required. Is that y'all's? Do they require it for y'all? Okay. Public schools, you have to do it. So, no, it's not required for you guys, I guess. I know, like, I used to work with Broken Arrow High School, and they have to do it in order to graduate or get a waiver. So I always tell families, if you want to put yourself in the most consideration for funding, you want to put your name in the hat, you should do it. Also, if you ever want to appeal funding or scholarship, most schools will not consider an appeal unless you have a FAFSA on file, or if your situation changes drastically before school starts, something like that. It's nice to have that on file to be able to move quickly. But other than that, if you just know that it's going to be a waste of time for you, then that would be the only thing. But like I said, I know most schools won't consider any appeals or anything like that unless a FAFSA is on file. Some schools will, but a lot of the ones I know don't, because we don't want to inhibit people from applying to our institutions. So definitely ask. And some schools will use a CSS profile. It's a whole other thing. I don't think really any school in Oklahoma, college really utilizes that. I know like TCU and things like that do. It's kind of like a special FAFSA. But you'll just want to double check. I haven't heard of very many that do, though. What else? I'm sorry? It can depend, but there are a lot of schools that will allow you to submit a scholarship appeal, whether it's maybe you don't qualify to appeal for the FAFSA for like job loss or something, but you're saying, hey, I'd like to appeal my scholarship based on these circumstances. And a lot of times they want to see a FAFSA to be able to verify or look at that. The question was, is there any preference given to choosing schools when you sign up and sending it to them right away for ACT or SAT? Honestly, if I were a parent, I would never do that. I would never have my students send a score without knowing what it is. Just because there's a lot of easy ways to get it to them after the fact. And it can harm a student if it's poor. I would say for schools that you're considering that you probably wouldn't want to, and it depends which ones you're considering, but I wouldn't want to submit a test score like say ACT unless it was a 25 or above. Not saying that some of the other ones, you know, would harm you that much, but depending on where you're applying, what you want to major in, that can be a factor. So for example, you know, if you're wanting to be an engineering student and you have an awful score on math in your ACT, like that can be a factor, just different things like that. So wait and see, and you can always submit it later. That would be my advice. So yeah, I would say that you would want to get a FAFSA in. So the answer is no, technically. But you want to make sure that you get a FAFSA in, I would say, by whatever your preferred scholarship deadline is at the schools you're considering. So like example, TU, that's February 1st. I would try to at least apply for your FAFSA by early spring, just because you want to try to make sure that you put yourself in the best position to get all the information back to you, because I know for most families it comes down to money, and you want to make sure that you have all the information back to you in a timely fashion to make that decision. I'm here to help, and I know that colleagues at other institutions are here to help. I've been really blessed to work in this profession with people who really care about helping students go to college. And so, again, my contact information, my cards, I'll stay after because I know sometimes it's better to chat one-on-one and answer any of your questions, chat about something a little bit further. So thank you guys for being here tonight and listening to me. Look forward to meeting with you and working with you guys, and have a good evening.